I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. In a historic vote, Congress moves to allow homosexuals to serve openly in the military. We'll find out what this may mean. And the DREAM Act dies in the Senate. We'll get local reaction and find out what's next for undocumented immigrants. Plus, a seasonal celebration from south of the border. Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. It was a busy weekend in Washington as lawmakers tried to wrap up the lame duck session so they can go home for Christmas. On Saturday, the Senate took an historic vote to repeal the policy that prohibits homosexuals from serving openly in the armed forces. By a final tally of 65 to 31, senators approved a repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The House had already passed the legislation, so now it makes its way to President Obama's desk, where he's expected to sign it into law later this week. The Pentagon would determine how to implement the repeal. Several military leaders have said any new policies would take effect gradually. The Defense Department also released a high-profile study a few weeks back that shows homosexuals could serve openly without harming military readiness. Now, supporters hailed the vote as a breakthrough for civil rights and an end to discrimination in the armed forces, but many opponents of the repeal say it will only hurt the military, especially during a time of war. Well, one group on that side of the fence is the Family Research Council, and joining me now is Tom McCluskey. He's the senior vice president of the organization's Legislative Action Arm. Mr. McCluskey, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Well, of course, as I said, I already mentioned the kind of your organization's position, and that was definitely the case as your president. Tony Perkins released a statement over the weekend calling it a tragic day for the armed forces when Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. He said that it will only do harm to the military's ability to fulfill its mission to fight and to win wars. How, in your view, is that the case?
Well, what Tony was doing, and Tony is a veteran of the Marine Corps, he was reiterating what the Marine Commandant also told Congress, was that this could cause division in the ranks at a time when we don't need that when we're fighting two wars, and that it could eventually, and this is General John Amos's words, could cause loss of life and the loss of a limb simply to push an agenda.
Well, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen, and also the Defense Secretary, Robert Gates, have come out in support of this, saying that it's a discriminatory policy that needs to be ended and really it's time for it to happen. And they seem to, take this study that was released back a few weeks back now by the military, a study that was done just to try and see exactly how it would affect, repeal would affect the armed forces. They seem to think that it won't hurt military readiness. What's the reaction to their views in that respect?
Well, we believe the study itself was very flawed. For one thing, it didn't even ask the troops if you support repealing the policy or not. Yeah, if you take the report at face value, which many on the Hill and many in the media have done, majority of members are opposed to changing the policy, and at least 12.6% of them said that they would leave or consider leaving early if this policy was implemented. Now, 12.6 might not sound a lot, but that is 264,000 troops who are saying that they might leave. And again, according to the report, many of those men and women are the ones in the front line and actually doing some of the fighting.
Well, that was kind of the case, I believe, a few years back before the Army in the UK was allowed, before openly homosexual people were allowed to serve in the Army in the UK or in the armed forces there in the UK. And a lot of people have said, well, that fear, a loss of retention, didn't really come to bear after the policy was changed. Do you think it's helpful to draw parallels to our allies overseas who have already implemented a policy that's very similar to this?
Well, this is by no means to degrade the United Kingdom's army or any of our other allies' armies. However, the United States is unique in the world, and our military is one of the main things that keeps us unique. The fact that this will affect unit cohesion, the fact that it hasn't really been thought out all that much. More of the world relies on the U.S. military than they do on the United Kingdom or any other military. So to compare it to other militaries is comparing apples and rocks. This policy, unfortunately, this policy change is being driven more by politics than it is by actual policy.
Right. Well, another group that before this repeal obviously was voted on just this past weekend that has come out in really against it has been military chaplains. Has there been any response from them?
Well, we worked very closely with the military archdiocese as well as with the Alliance Defense Fund, both of whom raised these concerns, and the Southern Baptist Convention. Between the military Catholic archdiocese and the Southern Baptist, they represent about 700 chaplains, and that oversee quite a few million men and women serving. What they fear is that this will restrict in how they counsel any of the men and women that are under their care, and that they might soon be drummed out as well in the name and sacrificed in the name of political correctness. We are looking at ways to work with Congress to, if this policy is to be implemented, and the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy changed, that chaplains and religious protections are in place.
All right, Tom McCluskey with Family Research Council, thanks so much for taking a few minutes to join us today. We appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks. Well, there's more currents coming up. Another major piece of legislation failed in the Senate over the weekend. It's the DREAM Act. I'll welcome two supporters of the bill to talk about the road ahead next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure. The day's headlines are coming up, but first, a dream died in the Senate over the weekend. The DREAM Act would have created a pathway for some young undocumented immigrants to obtain legal status through post-secondary education or through military service. It got majority support in the Senate, but fell short of the supermajority needed to end debate and bring the bill to the floor for a final vote. Well, joining me now in studio to talk about the DREAM Act are two supporters of it. Ulrich Monfleury and Claudia Galicia. They're with the group Brooklyn Congregations United. Thanks for being here, both of you. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
No problem at all. Now, Claudia, I understand that you are someone who would have benefited from the DREAM Act. Tell us a little bit about yourself and just a short version of your background.
Well, I came here when I was 13 years old, and I did my GED, and after that I enrolled into Baruch College, where I'm about to graduate. I'm earning a bachelor's in political science. I won excellence in political science, and I'm shocked because I thought that I'm going to be able to find a job now, and I'm going to have to be able to move on with my life. Unfortunately, now I feel that I'm stuck once again, and I don't know when things are going to be able to move on, because it was a great thing to have Democrats in control of the Senate, and I was hopeful that with the majority of Democrats, we were going to be able to pass the bill and have some kind of try to fix the broken immigration system that, I've been here for 20 years and I've been waiting for some kind of reform,
right.
and it just hasn't happened.
This leaves you in the state of limbo, really, where you don't know what's going to happen next.
No, and we don't know what's going to happen. One thing that I realize is that many Americans don't know who we are. And it's important for the American citizens, the American people to know who we are. We are students, and we are not any students. We are summa cum laude students who really deserve a chance to prove that we are doing well, that we pay taxes, first of all, like every other American, right. that we don't have school loans because we have to pay out of pocket expenses.
That you're making a contribution to society, basically, and that you're here and you're contributing. Ulrich, let me come to you now. Tell me a little bit about your involvement with the DREAM Act and trying to push that forward, and why are you so passionate about it?
I'm passionate about it because I've been involved in some activities in the community, and I experienced firsthand the suffering of some young people who were brought in United States of America as infants, as children, and right now they are stuck in the system. And the only country they know is United States of America. They are stuck now. They don't know what to do. And some of them are very, very bright students. We will be very helpful here in United States. And they are stuck in the system. And when you are stuck, you become vulnerable. You know, and when you are vulnerable, you can end up in jail. Yeah. You know, and end up in jail, you can, you're vulnerable, you can commit some crime. Right. You understand? And you can also be deported to any country that you never known in your life. You know?
Well, and that's one very good point. In the DREAM Act, I mean, it wouldn't have affected people who were just any young immigrants. It would have affected people who, like you said, came into the country at a young age, and those like Claudia who have a clean record and who are furthering their education and all of that. And so there's been kind of, I guess, maybe a lot of misinformation out there about exactly what this would do.
A lot of misinformation out there because people don't know what's really going on, you know? And what we experience ourselves in our involvement, we saw young people, honor students from high school, and who are stuck, and they can go anywhere.
Right. Well, it's a very tragic situation, one that hopefully will be turned around at some point, and we'll keep abreast of it, and we'll keep in touch with you guys as well, and hopefully we'll have you back on to talk about a happier time. Thank you both very much for being here. We really appreciate it. Well, stay with us. The day's headlines are coming up, including just ahead, a humble worker creates a Christmas tradition at the Vatican. Welcome back to Currents. Coming up in just a bit, a celebration of Christmas with the traditions of Mexico. But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. In his Christmas speech to cardinals and bishops at the Vatican today, Pope Benedict says the church needs to reflect on what caused sexual abuse.
Dobbiamo interrogarci su che cosa possiamo fare per riparare il più possibile l'ingiustizia avvenuta. Dobbiamo chiederci che cosa era sbagliato nel nostro annuncio, nell'intero nostro modo di configurare l'essere cristiano, così che una tale cosa potesse accadere. Dobbiamo trovare una nuova risolutezza nella fede e nel bene. Dobbiamo essere capaci di penitenza. Dobbiamo sforzarci di tentare tutto il possibile nella preparazione del sacerdozio perché una tale cosa non possa più succedere.
The Pope said both he and the Church were devastated by the extent of sexual abuse by priests. He says the Church is aware of both the gravity of the sin and its responsibility for it. Well, meanwhile, over the weekend, the Pope released his message for the World Day of the Sick, which will be observed on February 11th. He said that a society is judged by how it treats those who suffer. And new documents published on WikiLeaks show the U.S. pressed the Vatican to react more positively in the aftermath of the war in Iraq. According to the National Catholic Reporter, the documents say that in 2007, the U.S. ambassador to the Vatican met with church officials to protest the Pope's criticism of the war in his Easter message. The same document said the U.S. Embassy would continue to press for constructive comments from Vatican officials on Iraq. Well, turning now to this country, a proposed mosque near Ground Zero may go ahead just a little further uptown. The New York Post reports a lawyer with ties to Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah says the king may want to buy the former site of St. Vincent's Medical Center, where he would reopen most of the hospital and build an Islamic center that would include the mosque. In other news, data shows an increasing number of Muslim students in the U.S. are attending Catholic colleges. According to the Higher Education Research Institute, Catholic colleges had an even higher percentage of Muslim students than the average four-year institution. At Catholic University in Washington, for example, the number of Muslim students has more than doubled over the past 5 years. Meanwhile, a new study shows that 91% of Americans celebrate Christmas, but not all of them are Christian. According to Lifeway research, 89% of agnostics, 62% of other religions, and even 55% of atheists celebrate Christmas in some way. And finally, it's a tradition that has only grown at the Vatican, a nativity scene built by a street cleaner. And as we hear from Rome Reports, no less than 3 of the last 4 popes have gone to check it out.
The nativity scene of the street cleaners in Rome has been one of the most visited nativities by popes in history. It has been dubbed the street cleaner's nativity because that was the profession of the creator when he began displaying his work in 1972.
It shows day and night time. The trees are accurately presented, the layout, the houses. We tried to make everything representative of the Palestine of 2,000 years ago.
The nativity consists of 100 houses constructed down to the smallest details that include doors, windows, and even smoking chimneys. Mr. Ianni improves the nativity each year, adding features that he often finds from outside his home country of Italy.
The stones at the base come from all parts of the world, apart from Italy. There are over 350 stones from various nations. It's as if this crib were unifying all people in front of Jesus.
Over the years, the street cleaner's nativity has drawn popes, politicians, and tourists from around the world. For Mr. Ianni, this has become a deep source of pride.
3 Holy Fathers have come to visit this nativity scene. Pope Paul VI in 1974, and then from 1979 to 2002, John Paul II visited 24 times. In 2005 and 2006, Pope Benedict XVI visited. We also had Mother Teresa of Calcutta here for a visit.
Since its beginnings, the Nativity has drawn about 2 million Romans to visit and has been called a precious stone set in the Araglio neighborhood, only a few meters from the Vatican.
Oh, it's beautiful and so detailed. I love it. Stay tuned, there's much more Currents coming up. When we return, it's a Christmas celebration with the flavors of Mexico.
In some ways, you can compare the story of Jesus and Maria with the immigrants.
Well, earlier we took a closer look at the DREAM Act and what its failure may mean for immigration reform. Yesterday, that subject was on the minds of some folks in Manhattan who were thinking about some other immigrants who are very familiar to us this time of year, Mary and Joseph. Their journey to Bethlehem is reenacted every Christmas as part of a Mexican tradition. And that tradition was alive and well yesterday at the Museum of the City of New York.
We're here today at the Museum of the City of New York to celebrate our 7th annual Posadas y Pastorelas, a Mexican holiday celebration for families. Pastorela is a shepherd's play, is a story of how some comical shepherds are on their way. They see the star over Bethlehem and they want to come and pay homage to the baby Jesus. As with all good folk drama, it gets adapted to the situation of the times. So in this case, a lot of times people put very contemporary themes into the pastorela. Like if I was writing a pastorela right now, I would talk about the DREAM Act.
El sol y la luna esconden la cara de ver que María no hallaba posada.
The story of the posada is the search by Joseph and Mary, the pregnant Mary, to find a place to come in out of the cold to give birth to baby Jesus. Typically in a small village, the community will go from house to house singing a sung dialogue. Half of the community is Joseph asking, please let us in. And the other half answers back as the kind of bourgeois householder. No, you can't come in. What do you think this is? And then on the last night, or Christmas Eve, they're let in. So what we do in our celebration is telescope it down. We go out and sing with a mariachi, walk around El Barrio, and we stop at a couple of places and are halted. And then we come back to the museum and they let us in and we have our big party at the end of the event. It's a way of teaching people that you have to be kind to all and not reject people on the basis of their class.
the DREAM Act, because it's not, because it wasn't passed, it shatters the dreams of many people. Most immigrants come to this country to contribute, and that's the reason why we're here, and we want to create this understanding among cultures, and that's the reasons why we do events like this.
Kids, are the future, and they're under 6, I mean, I came here at 7, and I'm, very Americanized, so I do a lot for this country, and I'm sure those kids will too, so it's just a shame.
They were tired of walking, they were hungry, and then they followed the star.
It's the same kind of story, the immigrants are, walking around and they are knocking doors. In some ways, you can compare the story of Jesus and Maria with the immigrants.
Well, that is it for tonight. Now, coming up tomorrow, if you'd like to make someone's Christmas brighter, the tablet has some ideas. Editor Ed Wilkinson will be here to talk about the newspaper's annual holiday appeal. In the meantime, though, remember, we're always online over at currentsny.net. You can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. Until next time, I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night.